Hello, everyone. Today is August 25th, 2021. This is the Kubernetes Data Protection Working Group meeting. I think today we do have something on the agenda, but I do not see Eric here yet. Because he's the one who is going to talk about this snapshot policy. So we can get to this later. So I think we can just go over the white paper update first. Hey, Xiangqian, you want to talk about the white paper?
You can go ahead. I have some noise over here, sorry.
Okay. So let's see. So Xiangqian, are you all set with the section about the data protection definition? Is this all set? You still working on this?
No, I'm done with this section. I just need some eyes to
Review it?
go.
Okay.
Yeah, to go through it and provide if there's any feedback.
Okay.
I have a question. I have a question related to last time we met. We talked about inserting more diagrams into this white paper. I do have some diagram, but I want to ask why I insert is that do we have some kind of a common theme or common color theme? Because my favorite color is blue, so I do a lot of blue and many multiple settings. So, but do we have any like restriction, or should we do raise spell by diagram only? What do you guys think? I don't know.
I don't think we have set up any rules yet, but we can probably take a look. Maybe you can just draw it based on your favorite color, and then we can give you feedback.
Okay.
So yeah, we don't have any diagrams so far. So I know Xiangqian, you are trying to redraw the.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I already have. I just didn't get a chance. Didn't insert into this white paper yet. But anyways, it's a moving target, right? So we have the first version, and then we will own that repository. This group as a whole will own that repository, right? Should there's any updates, we can just review by ourselves and submit it.
Okay, in that case, I'm gonna start inserting the diagram that I have, and if you guys have any feedback on if you think the color is offensive or look ugly, just let me know. Okay.
Yeah, just remind a kind reminder, right? This file will be translated into a markdown file. And if you have any diagram, it has to be in a JPEG format or GIF format, whatever the format you have. It cannot be a Google Draw.
That's okay, right? We can always convert that. Just take an image, right, and then should be fine.
Yeah, just to make sure that you have a JPEG prepared somewhere. So later on when we submit that, we can include that JPEG.
We have a designer. Do we want to, if we come up with the architecture, we can have a designer kind of do a once over, just make it look.
We don't have a designer.
Oh no, I meant my team has one. If we want to, we can talk to her and see if she can, spruce it up a bit if we'd like.
So maybe we can see how everyone come up with the drawing first, and then if we want to have that in a unified style, then maybe we can talk to her about it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you for offering that. Okay, so I think this section is also ready for review. And then the next section is, okay, this section also ready. I think we actually went over this one. But if you have more comments about use case section, please add your comments there. And this is also, Xiangqian, it's also your printing guide, these two sections, right?
That is correct. And also I have done both sections.
Okay.
Again, I just need some eyes to help me find out whether there's any issue.
Okay, I see that Humble added this one. So I'm not sure, do we want to add, so those are kind of, I believe those are kind of out of scope, but I think he's talking about application rollback and the data replication out of snapshots. So I think, so those are kind of out of scope for this white paper for now, I believe. Do we want
Oh,
to mention that somewhere, or what do you guys think?
I didn't notice that. Let me take a look.
Yeah,
first.
take a look and see what do we do with those other use cases. I think we right now is everything I think we have here is actually already in the charter.
Right.
This is
sorry,
a
I
lot,
missed
so I'm not
I missed
sure.
this.
Okay, we can add it later, or we can maybe put that in a different section. Maybe it's a future or something. Okay, and then for volume backup, is someone from your team, Shangqian, is going to take a look, or is this all set?
I think Noah is going to take an action on that.
Okay.
Noah, can you take an action on that?
Yes, the volume.
Volume
Yes, I
backup.
can.
Okay.
The vast majority of the material is there. Right now, is a little bit too long. Maybe we should just make it shorter.
Yeah, just
All right, I will do that.
how do you assign?
Right.
Oh, is that right? I don't know how, I don't find his name. Okay, but anyway, you know what section this is. So I was just trying to add your name there now. I'm not sure how to.
Thank you.
So looks like it's not here. Okay. Right, and then the next, okay, CBT this. Okay, so this is a section that, okay, that found your okay, you already added this, and then you're working on a diagram for the section or for which section?
I will inserting diagram for CBT and application workflow, the backup and restore application workflow.
So that, okay, is Xiangqian, are you going to do that diagram, the application workflow?
Oh, in that case, then yeah.
I just want to make sure you two are not doing the same thing.
I'm doing that, but be my guest if you have a better one. I'm more than happy to take.
In that case, let me just insert the CBT first, and I will wait. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, and then voting populators. Okay, I think Ben added the section. Yeah, please review this. And this section, I believe. Okay, so this I think Tom, you're still updating, right? Okay, I see there are more.
Yeah, so Stephen and I met. I think he had another action item on the first section, and then I took the container notifier discussion.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to take a quick pass at the container notifier section to make sure that you're okay with it?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take a look. I think both me and Shangqian should take a look at this.
Yeah, my opinion here is that we have, this is kind of like a reference to the cap, and gives enough of an overview that when things change in the cap, doesn't lock down an opinion here, basically.
Yeah. Shangqian as well. Let's just add your as well. So we both take a look at this and see. Yeah, probably should just like a brief description of that. Okay, we'll take a look. And I think this is, I probably, yeah, if I think this is actually ready for review. If you guys think this is too much or too little, let me know. This is just adding the motivation and some goals. I didn't really add any details because the cap itself has some details. So this is ready for review as well. And this section, oh, okay, I see Prashant actually made some changes here. Let's see. Oh, okay, so he actually made a lot of changes. All right, so probably we should take a look and see. Is Prashant on a call by any chance? Okay, I'm not sure if he's done yet. So we did make a lot of changes. Okay, I'll ping him and see if he's done. Then we can review it. And okay, then we come to this section. I think Shangqian, you're going to take a look at this one, right? So this just
right.
Which was the set? Okay, I think which was the section that was added by Fang? Is that okay? This is this one, right? Backup application work. Is this section added by Fang? I forgot which section was that. I think this is
The last section is from Fang's pre CBT work. Basically,
no, but I think this section is also added by him. I believe there's a.
It was added by
right?
me.
Okay.
I thought you guys gonna re-edit it, right? You want to change some.
We'll take we'll need to take a look. We'll take a look. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember we actually went through this one before. Okay, so we'll take a look. And then comes to the appendix. So I think we're saying that we still want to keep those, so we can just go over this one and see if there's anything needs to be cleaned up. But it's kind of a useful. I think I actually have a few things maybe I want to add here. So yeah, but you know, this section is also ready to review and take comments to the appendix section. So there are a lot of examples of how different databases applications are doing QuiAS and provide their native tools to backup and restore. Okay, so all right.
Xing, have we had our report set up? I remember you had a
I'm
PR.
still waiting. Yeah, I think
Okay.
people's maybe they're on vacation or something. I opened an issue because somebody else will have to create an alias, because I don't know how to create those, and usually also the contributor SIG people do that. I will pin someone. So this was a few, I think I submitted that last week. I assigned to Paris and Nikita, but I haven't heard from them yet. It's still there.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's that for this. Anything else for this white paper? If not, we can go back to here. Let me see for Eric. Is Eric on the call yet? No? Oh, there he is. Okay. Hey, Eric.
Yes, I am. Sorry about that. I was caught on a different meeting.
Oh, that's fine. So yeah. So you want to go ahead and talk about this? Do you have anything to share, or should I just go to this? We have that notes there. Do you have anything else you want to share, or should I just go to here?
I think just go to what you have there. Thanks. Yeah,
okay.
So I don't have a formal proposal for this built out, although it's something that I'm thinking about. But what I wanted to get some feedback from the data protection working group was basically we at Infinidat have immutable snapshots implemented within our storage layer. And for clarity, immutable means to us basically that at the time of creation or potentially in a future policy update, that the snapshots can have a specific time before which you cannot edit the snapshot. You can't delete it, you can't change it. After, the customer may choose to delete it, or they may choose to do whatever they wish to it. But that's the critical aspect that I mean by immutability. We are seeing customers who are wanting to deploy these immutable snapshots as part of their overall data protection workflows with an eye toward ransomware ransomware recovery, and basically take immutable snapshots regularly, maybe every couple of minutes even in some cases, and then delete them after 24 hours or whatever. Basically cycle through continual immutable snapshots, copies of their most critical data sets. And ideally, they would like to have some awareness or ability to specify this on a policy basis with regard to the time element of immutability at the Kubernetes layer. And so there was some good discussion in the CSI community meeting last week on this topic. And I wanted to float it over to the backup vendors because I would assume that those who are on this call would have an interest in consuming that capability from the storage or coordinating that capability with the storage backends as well. There are many other storage vendors who implement this, as hopefully most, if not all of you know, and it would be good to have one standard approach as opposed to having each vendor roll their own kind of ways to expose this policy. So that's the genesis of this, and I'd love to hear feedback from folks in this work group as to whether that makes sense in the first place, and if there is interest from your respective organizations in such a policy being developed within the SIG storage community.
Thanks, Eric. You know, I can tell you what we do for immutable backups, because this is a really important feature, as you point out. We actually rely on the backup repository to do this. So the canonical example is Amazon the S3 API, and we use their features there. So they have a feature called object locking, and governance that lets you manage that. We typically don't, because we consume a lot of things through CSI right now, we don't actually require immutable snapshots from the storage provider. Having said that, if it was available, we probably, we definitely would use it. But I think for us, the more important side is actually the backup repository side.
What is the name of the policy we're talking about? This is S3 side, right?
S3, yeah. So there's object locking and governance. I actually gave a talk at KubeCon. If you're curious, you can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you can
it.
put the link of your talk there, would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll dig it up now.
Yeah, and Tom, I think it's a very interesting angle, or it's a very interesting perspective on both angles, both from the kind of backup target as well as from the source, or potentially as an intermediary step. So I think there should be absolutely room to consider integrations in both those areas.
Yeah, so even for Power Protect also we use similar approach. So we rely on the backup repository, which is data domain, to provide the retention lock capabilities.
Eric, a quick question for you, a clarification maybe. So is the idea to protect the in-cluster Kubernetes volume snapshot resources, and in turn you will return underlying volume snapshots? Is this the proposal, or are you proposing the CSI driver to have the capability?
The former. So, and it would need to be, at least from my perspective, it would need to be implemented with the backend storage. And this was discussed a little bit in the document that you can see that Xing was sharing a moment ago. So one failback or failover mechanism would be if Kubernetes enforced that time frame, or if CSI enforced that time frame for drivers that don't implement it in the backend. But that's obviously much less secure than having it implemented all the way through to the backend storage snapshot mechanism.
Hey, Eric, I do have a question. So that means your CSI driver will actually provision a snapshot, and that actually is your backup, right? So it's like a like AWS EBS snapshots, those type of snapshots, right? Because you're
correct.
Okay, so then, but that only applies to some cloud providers, basically, right?
Not necessarily cloud providers, but pretty much all storage appliances have snapshot mechanisms. Primary storage appliances have snapshot mechanisms. Most have some kind of equivalent of this immutability feature that I just described.
Right. But I mean, normally like a snapshot, a local snapshot, that's not really considered a backup, right? Unless if you move it to a third location that's away from your primary storage that you can protect if your primary storage is down, right? So I'm not. So so I'm just trying to see. So what you're talking about here is, for example, for Infinidad, you have your snapshot stored on your primary storage, or is this actually already uploaded to some object storage location when you take a snapshot?
No, you're correct, Xing. It's and again, similar story for other vendors. Maybe Ben can weigh in as well from, I know he was involved in the previous discussion from another primary storage vendor. This does not replace the need for immutability in the long-term backup repositories as well. And that would be the object storage mechanism or some other, implementation, depending on what the backup vendor workflow had set up. This is addressing kind of the intermediate stage for customers who want very quick ability to recover from, or at least manage scenarios where they detect a ransomware attack and ideally want to restore it within the primary array.
Yeah, you absolutely want this capability at each level, so you can have either and or both. And I guess the main reason it would be interesting to backup vendors is just the knowledge that snapshots might not be deletable, because some workflows involve take a snapshot, back it up, delete the snapshot. Well, the snapshot delete might fail, but that's okay.
But I think in that case, the backup vendor will actually control how to create the snapshots. So I think that should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that that's possible.
If it's if the snapshot
depends where the knob is to enforce this behavior, but yeah, like
I think backup vendor will kind of control like how to create a snapshot in the case, right? They can choose a different policy of something if they want to delete it. I guess it depends. I think in some cases they also want to give user option to retain.
We were talking about perhaps putting the mechanism into the volume snapshot class, in which case the backup vendor might just be consuming an existing class that they didn't create, and getting whatever behavior they get.
And so would that mean that we would, you take a snapshot, you delete it, you essentially, it wouldn't get deleted in the underlying system? Is that what you're talking about, Ben?
Conceivably, yeah. Well, one could imagine an implementation where someone set it up so that every snapshot that gets created hangs around for 7 days before it can be deleted. And then even the ones the backup vendor tried to create would hang around for 7 days, which might be undesirable, but
yeah,
like
actually not sure if that's
how the person set it up.
Yeah.
I think that backup vendor probably should have a way to configure the snapshot class.
I mean, ideally, yes, but like the way the layering is, it's not always possible to do that unless we define some very clear standards.
I mean, but normally I think when backup vendor do their backups, do they use existing snapshot class? Do you use your own? The question for backup vendors here.
We use existing, that's fine.
Yeah, we use existing.
So
But
then that means that
you
cannot adjust to the retention policy, basically.
I mean,
oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just saying that visibility must be there. Otherwise, I mean, it really affects the workflow. So if there is,
I think that's
so.
But in the short term, like this kind of behavior would be controlled by opaque parameters in the volume snapshot class that are going to be vary from vendor to vendor. So there's not going to be.
Saying, hold on, Ben. I thought we were talking about a snapshot policy CRD, right? I thought we're not saying.
Oh yeah.
Opaque anymore. It's not opaque, right?
No, that's the intention. But like, if I want to ship this feature to my customer next week, like I'm doing it through
of course.
opaque parameters.
That you can always do, of course.
And so if someone does that and a backup vendor then consumes a snapshot class, they will run into the behavior where the snapshots they're creating can't be deleted, and they just have to be aware of it. That's all I'm saying.
I think, that case, backup vendor probably will talk to the customer about those, right? I mean, that's just, I think we are talking about here is trying to see if we can introduce this as a CRD itself. Then, but did we say to set this in the snapshot class? Where do we set this policy? Do you remember? What did we say? I don't remember what was.
I don't think the issue here is so much snapshot policy or snapshot deletion or snapshots being immutable. Like for most vendors, by definition, snapshots are immutable. Also,
they're not undeletable.
Talking about delete,
but as far as deletion, they may
not deletable.
Let me talk about that part too. So as far as deletion, some vendors do have some limits, especially the ones that take snapshots, locally within a volume. But if you're talking about backup, those limitations go away because you can't write as many snapshots to an object store if possible. So I'm not too concerned about that problem. I think the main problem we have to really talk about is assuming we have a backup mechanism that, according to some schedule, takes these snapshots, and whether that policy is defined as snapshot policy, whether it's opaque or not, whatever, that's fine. I think let's say we have that mechanism in place. So we have a mechanism that periodically takes snapshots according to the schedule, according to the retention policy that the customer wants. Now that those snapshots are generated, how are we going to consume them? Because the Kubernetes model so far, we're only talking about user-driven, user-initiated snapshots. All the volume snapshot objects are user-triggered. In this case, users are not triggering, any snapshot objects. So the question becomes, how are we exposing these schedule-driven backup-generated snapshots to users so they can, for example, do restores? I think this is the main issue we should be talking about.
So scheduling is a complex topic. I agree that it's important. I would assume that would be coordinated by the backup software and trying to work with the storage underlying scheduling mechanism or somewhere in the intersection there. But I view that as potentially a separate issue from the more narrow thing, which I was discussing, which is just to boil it down, is basically knowing that a snapshot cannot be deleted until X time. That narrower scope is what I'm trying to solve here, or what I'm trying to gauge interest, if there's interest in community standardization.
I mean, I think backup vendors have already tackled that problem, especially, especially if these snapshots are not exposed to users through volume snapshot, objects, then there is no way for customers to delete them. I mean, the only way it can get deleted is someone goes, out of band and deletes stuff, which, is not really a concern here. I think the main issue is really if, for these scheduled snapshots, either taken by backup vendor or taken by the storage system behind the scene. Many storage vendors, like for example, NetApp, you can specify snapshot policy, and the, NetApp storage would take snapshots for you, on schedule. Assuming we have a mechanism to take these scheduled snapshots, how are we going to expose those to customers? So let's say if a ransomware attack happens and they want to restore their data, snapshot from a day ago, they can. And I think that's what's lacking really. So we kind of, have solved that problem, internally for our systems, but basically we periodically, generate these snapshot objects, we pull the backend and generate them, and we manage their life cycle. But that's not very, handy, plus there can be some period, for the objects to sync up with the state on the backend. So, but that's how we went about tackling this problem internally.
Eric, Krishna here. You have a good point, and there is a merit in exploring that, but with a caution. The reason is as follows. Whatever snapshots we take in the snapshot tier or operational tier, I'm not talking about those which are copied for long term. If we decide to keep it in a worm or immutable storage, we have to also evaluate the services quota limit of the underlying storage on which you are operating snapshot operation. So if you take a volume or disk, and in any cloud provider, the number of snapshots per disk will be limited number, let's say 100 or 200, something like that. It depends on the cloud service provider and the storage medium, but there is a limit. But when you have a policy that determines that any snapshot taken cannot be deleted for, let's say, 7 days or n days, and if the periodicity or frequency of taking snapshot for the customer is high, and then maybe within 1 or 2 days, they will reach the services quota limit, the maximum number of snapshots allowed. Now they are in a state where they cannot delete because of the immutable policy. At the same time, they have already consumed the max number of snapshot limit. They have to wait for 3 to 4 days until the 7th day appears so that they can have the older snapshots deleted. We just have to be careful about that aspect and how do we model that so that customers don't shoot on their feet. That's point number 1. Point number 2, we have this concept of storage classes where we have seen SWMR, MWMR, single read, multi-read, multi-write, single write, all those, right? Maybe we can use and expand that concept to bring in worm compliance also in there, and so that it becomes a qualifier in the storage class vis-a-vis storage attribute. I would think of those two as aspects, however, not dismissing what you're bringing to the table. There is some merit in exploring it.
Yeah, it's a great point, Krishna. And I would say, at least to the first perspective, obviously different backends may have different limitations with regard to storage snapshots. Again, I think the policy piece, the periodic policy piece, is a much more complicated issue. So I'm not trying to tackle that part, but at least with regard to the guaranteed inability to delete a snapshot, I would hope that would be enforced at by the backend ultimately. And if you were going to run into an issue, you've accumulated too many snapshots, you wouldn't be able to create more snapshots. So it doesn't really affect your ability to delete them. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Eric, so you asked if this would be useful for backup vendors. I think absolutely. We do have customers who have backup repositories that don't give us primitives that we can use for immutability. So I think having it at the storage, the snapshot layer would be really useful. To integrate with us, my preference would actually be to not have it done through a policy like this. we actually try to maintain any snapshot we reference to be immutable as long as it's live. Meaning for us, we would actually need an API that would extend the retention or immutability duration of an existing snapshot. And so you can imagine kind of essentially a CRUD, like CRUD type APIs on top of the immutability, the locking essentially on each of the snapshots, rather than putting it into the storage class or something like that. Does that make sense?
So you're saying basically manage it outside of the Kubernetes layer completely?
If we're going to consume, so I'm talking from my opinion here, so take it with a grain of salt. But if we were to consume immutability of underlying storage, we would want an API that would do manage the retention directly. So we could say take the snapshot, make it immutable, expires at some time. But then if the customer hasn't gone and deleted the backup or whatever that references that snapshot, we would have some system that would go and extend that through an API. In this case, it would be through a Kubernetes API.
Okay, so you would want a Kubernetes API mechanism to adjust the protected time or whatever we end up calling this.
That is what we want, but of course it depends on the underlying storage, right? If like Infinidat and NetApp don't support that type of API, then it wouldn't be very useful. It doesn't make sense to put in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
I have a little concern here. I'm a backup vendor here at Dell EMC. What we're concerned about is that from a backup point of view, when we create a snapshot, we then later will move that content to a different, to the backup storage, right? And we really concerned that if after we backup, we will then delete it. If you make the snapshot undeletable, that is something that we do not want. We want that after we're done with the snapshot, we clean it up, right? Or if we have some failure in our backup, we clean up the snapshot. So if you make the snapshot, if we can make it in the way that we want the control of the snapshot, not the other way around. I mean, we actually want the ability to delete it when we want.
Fong, I think that this is fundamentally different, right? This is the ability you can do that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can only do that. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, but one
You're
thing
correct.
is, yeah, but the backup vendor should have that control, right? If we hide this behind volume snapshot class or any of those parameters, then backup vendor won't have that visibility. So as long as it's visible, it's controllable behavior. Yeah, it's a great feature.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. We want to expose this, or in my view, the best path would be to expose this so that A, backup vendors would have awareness, and B, if there is support on the back end and support within the backup vendor, that it could be managed via Kubernetes APIs in a standardized way, not via vendor-specific approaches.
Yeah, and also not hidden behind any of these. I mean, it should be very controllable from outside. I mean, not hidden inside through some volume snapshot class parameters, which is not standardized.
I think we're talking about standardized. Basically, that will be like a first class field.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the
Then
snapshot class.
That's right.
I mean, if that's what we're going to do, I mean, because otherwise there's no point of adding this, right? You can do it right now.
Yeah, I think the big elephant in the room is really how much of these workflows are going to be exposed through Kubernetes APIs or not. For example, like for CBT, we said, this is going to be a service where you just talk to, let's say, a REST server, and it gives you all the change blocks. There's no Kubernetes API involved, right? Here, I think we have to make a decision whether these backup restore workflows are user-driven through Kubernetes APIs, or no, they're like driven through the proprietary APIs by backup vendors, because that can affect all these discussions. If backup vendors are responsible for snapshot schedules and their retention policies, that's like a black box. Those snapshots are not exposed to customers through Kubernetes APIs at all, right? So we don't have any problems of somebody going out deleting stuff, because they're not even aware that those snapshots are not even exposed to customers. So I think kind of go back to my earlier point that we have to kind of decide, whether we want to even how we want to support these workflows through backup vendors, through custom, proprietary APIs, or we want to standardize them as part of Kubernetes APIs, and that's where CSI comes into the picture, and Kubernetes APIs come into the picture. So for CBT, we were quite explicit. We said, no Kubernetes integrations. We just talk to a REST server, you get all the change blocks.
I don't think we have made that decision for CBT. Though.
Well, at least
I think that's
the discussion we were having like 3-4 weeks ago was we made that call, right?
I don't. Anyway, okay. I think we should talk about that later. I mean, not. Yeah. But this one, at least in the CSI community meeting, at least the thought at that time was to actually even have a Kubernetes controller actually would be there to prevent the deletion from happening. Right. So,
again, that's only from the Kubernetes side.
This is that's what is written here. Basically, that was a discussion happening. I was just telling you what happened last week in this meeting. Yeah.
I think you also have to consider the attack model.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty reasonable to assume that maybe a node is compromised and people can, have pretty high level root access to the system. And so
why is it root access? This is just the controller, just like this is like from the API level, more like a webhook type of thing, stop you from deleting the snapshot if the
right. But I think Tom, your point is that if a driver doesn't implement this functionality and it's just provided at the container at the CSI level, then you can compromise the entire system in a true kind of attack scenario. Whereas if it's implemented all the way back in the storage, then it addresses the issue.
Exactly. Yeah. For immutability, we do have to rely on the storage to provide something, which is.
But I think I don't think you can actually prevent that from happening, because if you because this type of like the webhook, right, that normally does not talk to the CSI driver directly. So it's like we're talking about 2 levels. So if we are doing this as a webhook at like in the Kubernetes layer, it's only looking at API side. So as long as you have this policy, we'll stop you from deleting it. And then there's another layer, which is on the CSI side, that's different. Those 2 are not together. That's what my understanding from the last week's meeting. But I definitely can see the problem. So there is definitely you could have this, out of sync, right? Because your driver doesn't support this, but then, but then you use the policy that is out of sync. That definitely could happen. So I think that was what we talked about last time. Ben, do you remember? We actually talk about that. Even for like volume expansion, we have something similar, because your storage class says I support volume expansion, but your driver does not support it, right? They are out of sync.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm in my car and the microphone never works. Yeah, like the big question is it supported or not? Like we have a lot of features that are universally supported, but the optional ones are really tricky because you need a way to sort of query the capability.
You cannot, right? So this is because we're talking about this is at webhook level. Normally, you don't really talk to the driver at this point. So the same as the volume expansion, right? So that's the same thing. Yeah.
So right, like a CSI capability is typically for the benefit of the CO to know if it can do something. It's not so a question whether the user can do something.
Right, but if you look at how that is implemented, normally if it's a web, we're talking about a webhook. I remember we talk about having something like a admissions controller that prevent, if the policy is set, then we will prevent snapshots from being deleted, right? But the admission controller normally do not talk to CSI driver directly. If we talk to CSI driver directly, then I don't see the problem. But I believe that's normally don't do that.
Can you even have the privilege to talk to CSI driver?
Well, we can put flags in the CSI driver CR that can be accessed by a webhook, so that like when you install the CSI driver, you can declare whether the feature is supported by that driver or not, and then other elements of Kubernetes can know what they're supposed to do based on that.
Right. So the same thing as we do with some other features. Basically, that's only way. But by default, this is you of course nobody supports this by default, right? If you want to support this, then your CSI driver has to declare that you support this. And then that's it. That's like one short thing. You can't opt out. Basically, you support it and you support it.
And you know, it might also be a separate feature where, to be honest, the majority of deleted snapshots are deleted because of, you know, that you didn't intend to, or operational failures. And I think, and putting this at the API layer here would be useful to prevent the operational failures. But for ransomware attacks, you really have to push down to the storage layer. So they could be separate features. They could be, you know, maybe there are separate use cases that we can solve separately.
Yeah, but my inclination is to like deliver something like this through a proprietary mechanism initially to prove that it can work, and then after it's been working that way for a while, then to generalize it into something that we can use across the board. But it's tricky with this kind of thing. So, you know, it helps to have evidence that, you know, the proprietary implementation is working before we try to do a standardized implementation.
So Eric, do you already have some implementation that can be shared? Then maybe can we start from there?
We did not implement this via our CSI driver. We were hoping for some kind of community consensus building before we did that, but we do have the APIs available in our system. So I mean, you know, we could think about it and mock something, but I'd really rather get the community consensus first on the preferred approach.
I think it helps build the community consensus to have a working model of it. I mean, maybe nobody could play with it if it's totally proprietary, but just to see how the upper layers can be built on top of it might still be helpful.
Yeah, Eric, it's actually a pretty common pattern. You know, for example, with CBT, you know, DP vendors can essentially detect that you're using, you know, vSphere, for example, and then directly integrate with the CBT APIs, even though it's not exposed through CSI or any Kubernetes API. And so it's a pretty common pattern actually for us to see, you know, specific features, really a customer request for consuming a feature from a storage vendor, implementing integration, and then that kind of becomes a model. And then we like to bring it back to the group to see if it worked, if there's issues with it, if it, you know, if it makes sense to put into Kubernetes.
And it would be so easy
I apologize. I'm new to this whole community process, so I appreciate everyone's patience as I kind of figure it out. Tom, if you're willing, I think we're actually already engaged at some level with your organization. Maybe you and I can have some time to discuss preferred implementation, because I think ideally the reference implementation would be something that both the backup vendor and the storage vendor can agree upon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And we could talk to shared customers, because I think they see if they're interested in this too, right? That'd be good. We like to be customer driven here, so that would be good. Yeah.
Of course.
I'll ping you offline.
Sounds great. Okay, so just to close off the topic, at least from my perspective, appreciate all the discussion here. I'll work with Tom and probably get some input from broader stakeholders and be thinking about a reference implementation of sorts. It will not be immediate on our side, so as there's further thoughts, we'll continue to consolidate that and come back to this group in due course once we have something to share, unless anyone has other ideas on how to proceed.
That sounds great. I would also like to see maybe the NetApp immutability APIs. I don't know if folks can share that maybe in the document. We can go through them and just make sure we're building a general model if possible.
Ben or Ardalan, or I think both of you are NetApp. Are you the right people to loop in on that area?
Yeah, I mean, we're the right people, but I personally don't know what these APIs look like.
Yeah, so as far as the APIs we built, these are mainly for internal consumption. They're not planned to be consumed by customers or exposed for now. but I can talk about the workflows and how they work, their nature. There's nothing really proprietary about the way APIs work. I mean, I still think we should somewhat discuss, what's the domain of backup vendors, what's the domain of Kubernetes as far as backup workflows, like what workflows we want to support through Kubernetes APIs, what workflows we want to support through backup vendors. I think that's the main question we have to ask or answer.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think we want to kind of hit build the most useful things, and if customers say they don't need this at this moment, then I'm okay with that. And Eric, I guess.
And yeah, I think there's some conflict of interest probably here too, because obviously backup vendors, they want to be first to the game, support a particular feature. So most likely they're going to have proprietary APIs. Same can go with storage vendors. They want to be the first to support certain workflows. But I think as a community, so putting aside our company hats for a second, I think if some workflows can be standardized, that can benefit customers, because you don't want 10 different ways for customers to, let's say, do backup restore or to handle, ransomware.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, so I'd love to hear your opinion on. You said all the APIs are kind of internal right now.
They are internal, yes, they're internal to NetApp, and we have no plans to expose them outside. But I can talk about how they work. There's nothing really secret about them. So.
They must be exposed at least for configuration, though, right?
So the configuration part, the way snapshot policies, you can define them on a backend, or for example, for a cloud backends. So for example, you say, I want so many hourly snapshots, I want so many daily snapshots, and the policy itself implements the retention policy. So you have so many daily snapshots, you have so many hourly snapshots, so many weekly snapshots. So that's how we do it outside of just the storage, just NetApp itself. But obviously NetApp also integrates with backup vendors. So and they manage the schedules. I mean, they may rely on NetApp for snapshot generation, but they manage the retention policy, or so I think and NetApp also has some plans with the Astra project to handle some of these workflows too. So I think basically we need to discuss maybe the workflow. I think this white paper is really trying to, one of the things we're talking with white paper is at least explain the problems. We may not have a solution as far as what we are planning to do, or what's the domain for the backup vendors, what's the domain for Kubernetes or for CSI yet, but at least the first step would be to explain these problems that we're discussing, and then we have to, look at the individual workflows and see, for example, kind of going back to the CBT discussions we were having, one of the things we discussed was, the churn, as if you use Kubernetes APIs for CBT, the churn would be too high. The objects are too large to be stored on etcd. So that kind of ruled out, Kubernetes integrations. Xing said, this is not finalized, but at least we had that discussion around it, right? So I think we need to have similar discussions for other workflows. I don't know if this makes sense or not. But.
I think it is worth describing the problem in CBT in the white paper. Do we have a section in there? I don't recall seeing one in there.
No, we don't have anything for this because we're. Well, we can see if we can add this there. I mean, I think we're basically talking about what is missing. Because this one, well, it's not really completely missing. I mean, in my view. But what do you think, Shangqian? Do we want to talk about this one?
I think we need to go through ourselves first before we talk about.
Yeah. So let's because we have a lot in the in there already. So let's see if we should add this one or not.
Okay, we can decide maybe for next week.
Right.
Yeah. And also, as Xiangqian was saying, we actually can, even after we have this first version of the white paper submitted, we can still go update it. It's going to be our repo, right? So yeah, I'm just saying that we don't have to rush because this one just came out, right? This issue just was brought up last week. It's not like other things we have been talking about those other issues for quite a while, right? So if we decide we want to add this one, we can definitely add it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Great discussion. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Is there something not found, or did you find it? Xiangqian, is the problems resolved? I think it was a chat here.
No, I got the link.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay, all right.
In the end.
Oh, okay, sure. Okay, thank you. And then I think that's it. I just okay, we still have this here. So KubeCon is coming. I'm not sure if anyone has the major decision to attend in person yet. But anyway, so.
Has anyone?
Hey, does anyone know if KubeCon's actually going to be face to face, or if they're waffling on that now, given the Delta variant?
No, it will be face. It will be face to face. I can send. I guess I'll drop it into the chat here if we have time. But there are some specific requirements. You must demonstrate vaccination in order to register. You will have to wear a mask on site, and they are following LA County guidelines, so it is subject to change. But it's estimated approximately a quarter of attendees may be in person.
Okay.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Have any companies fully backed out?
I do not know. Have you heard anything?
I think there was an assumption at the outset that no one would be in person, and folks have modified their plans to potentially be there. I wouldn't place a bet on whether or not the situation now remains, but I'm not aware of anyone having pulled out entirely. I know there's some folks that had assumed at the outset they wouldn't be there and haven't changed that.
Tom, for the CNDM day, I thought that's like an in-person event. Is there any change on that?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's a companion event to KubeCon. It's not exactly co-located, but it's located in near proximity, using the same sort of guidelines for attendance. Similarly, they'll have a online quote unquote virtual presence, but then there'll also be an in-person. I believe there's a museum, perhaps the Grammy Museum nearby the LA Convention Center, is where the physical portion of CNDM Day will be held.
So it looks like it's changed. I thought initially it was all in person. I thought that's how I remembered, but I could be wrong. Okay.
It's going to be both.
It's both.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else? All right. That's it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.